Okay, so we were talking a little bit about fever and hypothermia. So this video we're going to talk about sepsis. And the reason I want to talk about sepsis is that a lot of people seem to have misconception about sepsis or not understanding the proper stuff about it. And I want to try to make it simple and stuff. And one way I always teach people about sepsis is this. So, sepsis is a continuum. You go from being normal, and then an infection. So we were talking about in the last video that SEERS can be different things. You can be trauma, it can be an allergic reaction, it can be anything. Anything will trigger your inflammatory process. Anything. Well, anything that goes into your body will create that. Then you have the SEERS protocol. When we get to sepsis, means that it's an infection that triggers your SEERS. And so that's why we'll stay with that. So at this point, we have our SEERS, but we know that is an infection. And if you look at the septic protocol, that's how it was written by. It says SEERS plus suspected infection, sepsis. And why do we want to catch it? That's why. This is how I always see it. When you're at septic shock, you're down, and to go back up to normal, it's harder work than if you're at sepsis and you turn them back to SEERS, that you bring them back to normal. A little bit easier on the flat surface than to climb up the hill again. So what is sepsis? Basically, it means that your body is going in war. So this is how I see it. So imagine that you have like the Second World War, right? Or the First War, whatever one of history you guys like. And there's a big battle. Battles start, you're going to send your normal army. Because, you have your army, you don't know how big the battle is yet. So you send your normal army. So you send your army, and the battle is bigger than you expected. So now you're losing a lot of your warriors, but you need more. So then you start to train people, but instead of having the 5, 6, 7, 10 years of experience that you send on the front of the first time, now you have to train people in months and smaller version. And quicker, to a point that you almost said, here's a gun, go over there and shoot people. And more you're doing this, because the war is getting so big and big and big, you need to ship people a little bit more. As well, because the front is away from this, you need to do a lot of transport. So that means that you need to push people up, and you dispense a lot of energy to do that, and you use the railway or whatever you mean to get to this transport, and so you're using a lot of transport and stuff. This is where SEERS is. So when you have your first battle, you're sending all your big army. If your army is good and they contain it, it's finished, and you'll go back to normal and the battle is finished. If you can't, you're going to sepsis. One of the signs of sepsis is what we call band. And you'll see that on the white blood count cell, 10%, 20% band, or whatever. Well, the band are the white blood count cells when they're immature. And this, in my story, is basically those soldiers that you're like, here's a gun, go and shoot. More you have of those, more that means like the body is towards the end of his battle, and he's basically shooting everything that he can do, even people that are not even uneven trained, so not even white blood count cells that are trained. So that's why you see an increase in the bands. You're sending pretty much anyone. The reason that we're tachycardic, that we're flush, that we're red, is because of this. Those army needs to circulate to the battle. How you do that? through your vascular system. So how do we do that? Is that basically their heart will pump faster to kind of create this thing, which will create an increase in your temperature because you have dilatation to send those people. And as well, what happened is that inner vessels, it's usually closed like this, but usually your infection or anything will be outside the vessels. So what the body will do is open up those things so that the white blood count cells, because they're pretty big, molecules. So basically they'll have to cross over. So they have to open up and they'll go. And that's why you have like a shift and you lose a lot of fluid as well, because now this fluid goes outside, and as you open it up, you open up to everything, not just white cells goes, but not the fluid. So the fluid goes as well. So that's why we have vasodilatation, and that's why we'll see the signs and symptoms. But that's why we also have pulse pressure widening, and as well as opening up the vessels means like the fluid will go down, and that's why we have the septic shock, which we'll talk a little bit further. But this is what sepsis does. And that's why the first thing, if you have one thing to do in your whole thing for sepsis, and start giving the antibiotic before your blood culture, before whatever. There's been studies after studies, especially HeartSnet, that says do not delay antibiotic administration for any test. I'll repeat that one again. Yes, your blood culture, if you have to give your antibiotic, you give your antibiotic, then you take your blood culture. And HeartSnet was supporting that, because the only thing that will prevent this from this is the reversal of that war. It's the helping the body to recuperate for this. And antibiotics will do that, because they'll start killing this colonization. Because we all have bad, I don't know, billions of, I think I read somewhere that there was 8 billion cells on your body. 8 billions. And some are good, some are bad. And so when we have in the body, it's the colonization that creates an infection. So that means that we may have an infection that is contained at sears, and it's maintaining that way. And our body can manage it. But when it becomes so big, that means that one cell becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, like that process. Well, that means now the body cannot cope with this. So by giving antibiotic, hopefully we'll kill some of them by the antibiotic attacking them. And hopefully we'll be able to contain a little bit more and fight the battle. So that's why your antibiotics are so important. I think it was for every hours that the antibiotics are not given, it's like 10% mortality or something. It's incredible. Like the risk of mortality is way higher if you delay the antibiotics. So first thing you need to give is those antibiotics. You need to give them quick as you can. Give them in their body, and boom. And that's why we go wide spectrum as well. We don't wait for the blood test or anything. We shoot them. So we shoot high. And then as we get our test back, so our blood cultures, that takes 2 or 3 days, or we get more specific, then we can brought down on more specific antibiotic to prevent resistance to antibiotics. But we shoot large, and we try what's majority of, so if you have an infection in your lung, majority is X. Culprit in your stomach, it's X, it's Y, and so that's why those antibiotics are more for abdominal. The other one is more for the lungs, and the other one is more for whatever. So that's why we give those ones. It's just because we cover pretty much everything else that we cover. But they're really, really important to give. It's not the fluid, it's not the levofed, it's not the Tylenol, it's nothing else than the antibiotics. Antibiotics are so important in sepsis because it will prevent you to go over there. After that, we have to, so once we have started the war, now we need to maintain the body, maintain our troops over there so that they can win that war. And that's where the fluids, the levofed, if we have to go there, will help us maintain the body until the body does its job, meaning killing the intruder. So this is sepsis, really important. So when do we get to septic shock? So sears plus an infection equals sepsis. Sepsis plus low blood pressure equals septic shock. If you're there, you're a little bit down the road. So to go back, it's pretty, because that means your body, again, that opening up has happened, the vasodilatation has happened. And also in sepsis, there are kind of two kinds. Then the hot and the cold phase. And the hot phase means that the body is going to create actually a greater cardio output. So a lot of those stuff that has been released, and if you ever want to check how this inflammatory process works, it's about a chart about that long of LIS5 and TNK7, whatever. It's pretty long. When all those are released, basically what it does is it increases your cardiac output. So when is the first sign of sepsis that we've been told? Widening pulse pressure and bounding pulse. And this is why. The widening pulse pressure comes from the dilatation of your vessels. So if you think about it, I got my vessels dilated, but I have a heart that pumps like crazy. So because I got dilated, that means that the blood will shoot through, will hit at the systolic pretty high because it will come out, which will be my bounding pulse. But because it's dilated, when I go to my diastolic, the blood will come and go down and the pressure will go down. And that's explain the differential of the pulse pressure being so different. And that will explain also the pounding. So that means that the cardiac output is high. So that's why usually you'll see it on the hot phase, which is the first beginning. So that's where you have the temperature and everything. But if you look also at the sepsis protocol, we always talk about low temperature sometimes. And this is the cold phase, because the body can only do that for a certain period of time. Because again, just like a government with an army, you ran out of supplies and bodies and money. So at one point you have to slow down, or you're not as effective as you were at the beginning of the war as later in the war. So you go into cold phase, and the cold phase is that's when we can see people with lower temperature. People are also immune compromised will be more in the cold phase because we have shut down their immune system, so they cannot respond as well. So they'll have lower temperature, or they won't have much signs of the sears, but you can have suspicious of their sepsis. So for example, if you have someone that has is known diabetes, has ulcers in his leg, and comes with a history of his sugar not being normalized, either high or low, there's something going on in his body. And this person, even if doesn't show any signs of temperature or tachycardia or anything like this, he could be an infection because his immune system is down, and for whatever reason could have also cancer or something, and he could be on immunosuppressant. And the body, the only way that you can see it is that he's using all his sugar. So either his sugar is very high because the body is responding to it, or either his sugar or very low because we're in the cold phase of it. So sometimes those will be only the symptoms that you will see about sepsis. And that would be a person that you would need to do pretty much the workup of, at least rule out that they have an infection to explain their sugar kind of going up and down. So after you did that, if you fail to do that, then you'll go to the septic shock. And septic shock means that now you need to maintain the body pretty harder, so that means more fluids. But the problem with fluids is that they'll go third spacing, and it's not that easy. Even started on Levofed, it's not that easy because it will constrict, and if you leave them too long on that, they can shut down their kidneys, and that could be a complication of prolonged Levofed drips. And then the multi-organ failure. And multi-organ failures is basically when DIC start kicking in, meaning that your platelets get all together, creates all those little emboli, and then shoot them everywhere, and then you can have shutdowns of organs because of that. The first one you can see is elevated liver function. The other one also will be the kidneys because of the decrease, because of the shock. The kidneys will shut down, and then you can have renal failure. But so then you need to monitor that. Anyway, hopefully I hope it was helpful, and I'll talk to you soon.